So you grow up in Corvallis, and he ended up unfortunately passing away when you were 9. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah.
happened?
He, it was just kind of a crazy story. He had an abscessed tooth and he went to, they gave him antibiotics for it. It was a high powered new antibiotic that was brand new on the market. And he wanted to get back to work. He was a salesman for my grandfather's company. He wanted to get back to work. And so they gave him this new drug and the infection went away. But a month or so later, he started getting sick. And they didn't put the two things together at the time because that drug was so new. I don't think they really knew all the side effects. And so I think that he figured out he was getting sick in November and then he died in February.
Like what do you mean getting sick? What did he feel like?
The drug caused his bone marrow to quit working. So he developed aplastic anemia. And at that time it was totally incurable. They had no way to do it. Now they do bone marrow transplants. He might have had a chance, but they didn't know what he had. They had no idea. They had him in isolation because they didn't know if it was contagious. They had no idea. So,
and they confirmed that it was because of this medication eventually.
Yes. He's like on the books. He's like one of the first.
Why didn't your family sue the pharmaceutical company?
Well, that was a topic, but my mom said nothing is going to bring him back. And she didn't want to. It's so my mom and me, actually, she didn't want to make trouble. didn't want
to ruffle feathers, didn't want to have confrontation.
And she was so devastated by everything. I just don't think that she could think about it, to be honest. So
she wanted to move past it.
I guess I don't really know, but I remember people later saying, your mom could have sued them. The pharmaceuticals.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Possibly the dentist. I don't know. She did not want to get the dentist in trouble because he didn't know. So,
right. God, that's so
and
tragic.
She was only 35. My mom was only 35. So that was, that was rough. That was rough.
My goodness. So your childhood was, if you had to sum it up,
it was great until it wasn't great. That's how I would put it. Because that was,
that was a turning point. And what went sour after that, other than just the tragedy of losing somebody?
Well, my mom was only 35. She had no skills outside the home. She had to get a job. She was and legitimately so, very preoccupied with surviving and dealing with grief and putting food on our table. My brother was already 15, so he was, not to say it was easy on him, I don't mean it like that, but he was kind of on his own anyway. He was independent. I was still very dependent. And so I think that the adults were doing adult things and dealing with the new life they had in front of them. And Dan and I were sort of, I don't know. I didn't feel like they were really paying attention to me. And I don't think they were, but it's not their fault. I knew that at the time even. So I just became this. I have to take care of myself. I'm the only one that's going to be watching me. So I became vigilant, watchful, the mom, because I believed that I was the only one watching out for me. Not that they neglected me at all. It's not about that. It was just an internal thing with me, I think. As I get older, I realize that I'm sure they were watching me and they were probably trying to help me. But I had made up my mind that adults couldn't be trusted. And so I just sort of went off on my own deal. Let's put it that way. So,
is that the point when your mom started? Is that when she started drinking?
No. I think that was a while later. She was working 8 hours a day and just trying to survive. It was a little later. They had belonged to this culture of friends that were party central. I mean, they were hard drinking, jazz playing, let's go to a party people. And so when Dad died, because he was the real party guy, I think just gradually, she wasn't a drinker during the party days, but I think just gradually it started. And then she remarried when I was like 18, and he was a real drinker. And then that's when it really started. So I would say about 9 years after my dad died.
Did the alcohol, because she was like really a drinker, right? She was what would be considered an alcoholic.
Yes. And I'm pretty sure my dad was, and my grandfather, and maybe my grandmother. I grew up in Alcoholville. It was just my life. Everyone had cocktail hour and, parties where kids were just sort of in the background and the adults were hooping it up. But what did you ask me?
Oh, I was just saying it would be considered alcoholism what she got into. I mean, she was an alcoholic.
Definitely. No question about it.
And I'm sure that affected you.
Yeah. Yes. It's really, anybody who grows up with an alcoholic parent knows it's not good. It's very dysfunctional. She was also prescribed drugs like all the women were back then, Valium, Vicodin, whatever. So she was dealing with pills and alcohol, and it wasn't pretty. And it just made me know that that's not what I wanted to do with my life. I became, I think you can go two ways. You can join the party, or you can become, strident in your